hello. Good afternoon in Guatemala. Good afternoon in Spain, or the time you are in right now. Welcome to the UFM Madrid podcast. Today we are glad and happy to have here John Chisholm. Do I pronounce well? Did I pronounce well your last name? John is, among many things, because he has a long experience on business. Among many things, he's an expert on entrepreneurship, international entrepreneurship, because he's a man who has traveled the world. And today we want to know more about him, about the hints he can have for us, for our students, about how to work out in this world, which is a very interesting world, but it's also a tough world where you have to know the right skills, the right technical skills to be able to survive on the jungle and fun that is business. We want to first ask you a little bit about your background, if you can explain us a little bit more about your background. Afterwards, of course, we're going to talk about your book. Can you explain us a little bit about what you have done in the last 20, 30 years of experience in around the world?
Sure. Well, I've been in Silicon Valley for 40 years. I sold my first company, a division of Sun Microsystems, acting as business broker in the early 90s. Started my first company, Decisive Technology, in 1992, which was the first company to automate surveys on the internet. That company was acquired eventually by Google. The third company was Customer Sat, a pioneer in what's now known as enterprise feedback management, or automating customer feedback for large enterprises. That company was acquired by Market Tools. And the fourth company is Pi's, a startup in mobile intelligence, and that company is still in the early stages. After the third company, Customer Sat, I wrote the book, Unleash Your Inner Company, which I like to say contains as many of the mistakes as I've made over the last 40 years as I was able to squeeze into 400 pages. It's not, doesn't contain all of the mistakes I've made, but a representative sample so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. It's a step-by-step, 10-step guide for discovering, launching, and scaling the ideal business for you, starting with unsatisfied customer needs in areas you're passionate about. And it's a composite of the processes I've used in all four of these companies.
Well, John, one question which I'm sure is going to touch you. Does an entrepreneur is a natural skill, or do you work to be an entrepreneur? Do you have to study? Which is the right thing?
So in other words, are entrepreneurs made or are they born?
Or they're born.
Well, it's a question I have a very strong opinion about, and that is I strongly feel they are made, not born. If you're born to do something, then either you can do it or you can't do it. I don't buy that. I think anyone who deeply aspires to has the potential and ability to become an entrepreneur. So many people nowadays don't become entrepreneurs because there are so many easier paths to follow. But think about it. 15,000 years ago, there were no salaries, there were no paid vacations, there was no sick leave. All of us had to be entrepreneurs, whether it was hunting or gathering or trading with our fellow hunters and gatherers. And so if 15,000 years ago we could all be entrepreneurs, surely we could again all be entrepreneurs today if we wanted to be and if we had to be. So I do think anyone has the potential to become an entrepreneur if they deeply aspire to do so.
And how do you turn someone who has never thought about being an entrepreneur to convince him or her that he can do a good job of being an entrepreneur? Because people sometimes in nowadays societies don't like that much risk, and normally entrepreneurship is you have to take risks.
Indeed. Well, the place to start, in my view and experience, is where you have natural advantages, and that is in your areas of passion and perseverance. We have so many advantages, we don't even realize it or think about it in the areas that we're passionate about. In those areas, we can stick with something to break through obstacles. We see unsatisfied customer needs sooner than other people in the areas we're passionate about, because we're trying all the different products and services in those areas, and bumping up against the limitations of those products and services. And some of those limitations will be unsatisfied customer needs. And third, your passion and perseverance are contagious to other members of your team. So there's a multiplicative effect. We hear a lot about passion these days. Every business book talks about passion. Some business books also talk about the importance of perseverance. That's becoming more interesting. No one is talking about how the two reinforce each other and form a positive feedback loop. Passion is an attitude. Perseverance is a behavior. And in many aspects of our lives, our attitudes and behaviors reinforce each other and form a positive feedback loop. Think about it. If you just stick with something until you start to like it a little bit, and then stick with it more and get better at it and start to like it more, and then stick with it more and get really good at it, that's an example. So that you really love it, that's an example of perseverance driving passion. Conversely, if you're already passionate about the idea, the hours can go by like minutes when you're engaged in that activity. That's an example of passion driving perseverance. So you can see how the two reinforce each other. If you can think of any aspect of your life where you have experienced that positive reinforcement between passion and perseverance, that's probably a really good idea to consider starting a business. Now, it's not sufficient just to be passion and perseverance. You need to search for unsatisfied customer needs in those areas. But again, you'll have advantages over other people who might try to satisfy unsatisfied customer needs in those areas. And there are lots of different ways and techniques for recognizing and identifying unsatisfied customer needs. The book talks about different ways of finding them. But just think of any product or service in an area that you're passionate about that you currently use, and then think about what are limitations of those products and services. If you're a runner, think about running shoes. I can think of 3 limitations of my running shoes. Number 1, they start to smell after I've worn them too many times. Number 2, they don't tell me how far I've run or how fast I've run. And they should know that, shouldn't they? And number 3, if I want to change the shoelaces to match the color of my outfit, it's a hassle to thread and rethread those shoelaces each time. What if there were a way to do that easily? So you can see there are an infinite number of unsatisfied customer needs that we're surrounded with all the time. You just have to look for them. If you think about how you can apply any positive adjective to any product or service, for example, could a product or service be made cleaner, smarter, cheaper, lighter, more intelligent, then any of those is potentially an unsatisfied customer need. If I may, occasionally I hear it said that it seems like all the unsatisfied customer needs out there have already been satisfied. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. Yes, it's true that every time a new product or service comes to market, customer needs are being satisfied. But every time a new product or service comes to market, new needs are being created in 3 different ways. Number 1, the product or service itself can be improved. Number 2, the companies providing those products and services have needs for design, inventory control, sales, marketing, analytics, you name it. And 3, very often new products and services create new needs around them. For example, a new mobile device creates a need for a new carrying case, or autonomous vehicles create a need for charging stations. So there have never been as many products and services on the market as there are today. So there have never been as many opportunities to start a new venture and make it a success as there are today.
Yeah, you are talking about like disruptive innovation, no? Once there is a new innovation, some things are gone, and some things come new, and then you have to enter into the market.
Any customer need has only a limited life. And so acting quickly is an important part of starting a new venture, because otherwise someone may satisfy that need before you do, and then the need goes away.
That's right. You have talked about qualities, about natural skills that an entrepreneur must have. Is there any technical skill which you can think is important for someone to learn in school and in a business school, which is important? I was thinking about engineering. No? Engineers are very important in nowadays businesses. No, any technical skills that people must think about when starting an entrepreneurship. Of course, the technical part of each sector, market sector. No? If you're a law firm about law, no, if it's a commercial company about commerce, no, but outside that technical part, like some technical part that works out for any entrepreneur.
Well, here are a few thoughts on that. Number one, when I think about the most important qualities for entrepreneurs to have, I don't think first of technical skills, but I think of qualities, human qualities, things like passion, perseverance, curiosity, diligence. It takes time to drill down, talk to customers or potential customers, really understand their needs, and then creativity to explore different possible ways of satisfying those needs. And then as best as you can, finding a fit between the need and the solution that you've come up with, and iterating to make the fit as strong as possible, refining the customer need and refining your solution. All of that takes perseverance. If I had to choose one adjective, I'd probably choose perseverance. But one of the exercises I recommend in the book is creating your STARS chart. Now, what's a STARS chart? Well, that's the word STARS with 2 A's and 2 R's. Your skills, the technologies that you know about, your assets, physical, financial, and knowledge-based assets, your accomplishments, your reputation, your relationships, both personal and professional, and your strengths as in inner strengths, things like creativity, perseverance, diligence, and so forth. And that spells the word STARS with 2 A's and 2 R's. And an exercise that's really worthwhile is to take out a big sheet of paper or use a spreadsheet with 7 columns on it. Put one of those words at the top of each of those 7 columns, and under each word, write down as many of the skills, technologies, assets, and so forth that you have that you can think of. It's a good exercise to do with somebody who knows you well, because they will see strengths in you and resources in you that you don't even see in yourself. Well, this chart represents all of the resources that you have to bring to bear to start a company. And we use this chart in 4 different ways throughout the 10-step process in the book. Number 1, to assess the fit between you and each of the unsatisfied customer needs you've identified. Number 2, to see where the gaps are, to see what additional resources you need to develop or acquire to do the best job of satisfying each of those customer needs. 3, to build your self-confidence. It's hard to start a business. You'll run up against all kinds of obstacles, and seeing all of the resources that you have in front of you can be helpful to that regard. And finally, to innovate, because innovation is largely a process of combining things you already know in novel ways. And this chart lays out all of the things that you know, so you can look for different combinations of the items on the chart and think of customer needs that you might satisfy, that combination might satisfy.
This is a question that I'm sure you have been asked before, but how do you turn an idea into an entrepreneurship, into a company, into a multinational?
Well, everybody talks about starting with an idea. I prefer to think of starting with the customer need. And as I like to say, there are 2 parts to the customer need. Number 1 is the customer, and number 2 is the need. I much prefer to think of a customer need rather than a market need, because market need makes it easy to forget that there is a human, breathing, living customer who has the need. It might be an organization like a business or a nonprofit or a government agency, but even that organization has people who have the need. So as best you can, define as precisely as you can who is the customer and what is the need. And if you can articulate those really clearly and precisely, then a big part of the battle is already done. Now you can start thinking about, how can I satisfy that need? You have to test it to make sure that it's real and unsatisfied, and that there are not good solutions out there already, but if people are complaining about it, or if chances are it is a real customer need. And then we talk about in the book scaling it up or down to fit your resources. Initially, you'll have to be very specific because you don't have infinite resources. And, instead of serving your entire city, maybe you just have to serve your neighborhood. Maybe you just have to serve your street initially, or maybe there are many different ways to segment the customer base. And that's a way to get started. Yeah, I generally find it's much better to serve effectively a narrow customer need, satisfy that customer, get paid for serving the customer, generate some initial revenue, and then expand from that need.
That's great.
Rather than starting out really broadly and vaguely, where you don't have a clear advantage. And that approach often doesn't lead anywhere. When you hear of businesses who year after year never seem to make any traction, never get anywhere, in my experience, it's because they're not focused on the customer need. They may be someone like me who is enamored with technology. I'm an engineer, and they may be focused on the technology instead of the need. I like to say that I started my first company with a really cool technology for which there was no customer need. And it took me 6 to 9 months to let go of that idea and swap it for something for which there was a real customer need, namely the ability to do surveys on the internet. That product became a hit. And it's that company that was eventually acquired by Google. So it really does work. Start with the customer need, and that way you'll know you really are satisfying a customer need.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Are there the entrepreneurial skills are fit for every step of the company's journey, from the start, from the identifying, as you say, the customer needs, to start a small company in the street, to afterwards turn your company into a city company, then into a national company, then into a multinational? Is always the same person who must run the show, or is there someone fit for some parts of the job and someone fit, another leader for some parts of the job?
Well, of course, different skills are absolutely required as the company grows. And
in fact, you have sold your companies at one stage or the other, so I'm sure you recognize that maybe it was the time to step down, no, for example.
Well, actually, in my first company that I started, Decisive Technology, we brought on board a really great executive to be CEO of the company, and I became VP of Business Development. In my second company, I ran the company all the way through to its acquisition and to running the company as a business unit as executive VP and general manager in Market Tools that acquired us. So, yes, I think it can be a tough decision for the entrepreneur. We can think of plenty of examples of
McDonald's.
There are plenty of examples both of entrepreneurs that successfully ran the company from the outset to Fortune 500.
Steve Jobs now.
Salesforce, Apple. Although there was a period, of course, even in Apple's history where Steve Jobs was out, but then he came back into his great credit. Hewlett-Packard were my great inspiration because they were the first technology company I worked for, and I actually got to meet with Bill Hewlett for 90 minutes early on, and it was tremendously inspiring. But there are also plenty of examples of companies where the entrepreneur stayed on too long and to the detriment of the company. So it's a really tough call. Very often your investors will either guide you with that decision or force you to make a decision along those lines. And they probably, very often they can see things more clearly than the entrepreneur can, because the entrepreneur is probably enjoying running the show, has ideas about how to do it, wants to do it, probably isn't as aware of his or her own limitations as a team of independent investors might be. So what advice would I have to an entrepreneur on that question? Maybe seek out the feedback from people that you trust and whose judgment you believe in, and ask for their input, and use that to help make the decision.
Mm-hmm. Does innovation must be centralized in one department in a company, or a company work out the innovation among different departments and everyone giving their voice on innovation?
Occasionally you hear of a Fortune 500 or a large established company having a department of innovation or something along these lines.
Yeah, but
it's troubling to me. It kind of suggests all the innovation is
under one person,
compartmentalized in one department and not pervasive throughout the company. I can see if a department of research where a team of specialists, experts, engineers, researchers, scientists, whatever, is needed to go really deep in developing technology for whatever that business is. But I generally would prefer, I think, to see innovation as part of the purview of every single department: sales, marketing, operations, supply chain management, product development, product management. Any or all of these could and should be innovating continuously.
Well, talking about project development and project management, should it be also centralized, or should it be also work out in different departments?
Well,
because that's one of the main things you do when you're doing a business, no?
A
new business.
Early on in the company's earliest stages, the CEO and his or her management team is the product management department.
Right.
Generally speaking, your sales or marketing team will be closest to the customer need, and your engineering or software development team will be most informed about the possibilities of coming up with different approaches to solutions to that customer need. So both parts of the business bring something essential to innovating. And you can get pretty far along, into the double-digit millions of dollars of revenue, and perhaps further, before having to create a separate product management department. It varies depending upon the industry and also the people that you have. If you have a team, a head of engineering who's particularly customer oriented and a head of marketing who's particularly technology savvy, then that combination may serve as your product management team, and if they work well together, for a very long period of time. So again, it depends very much. If you're selling to semiconductors industry, so that your customers are process engineers or material engineers or some other really technical person, obviously the marketing and product management will be much more technical than it is if you're selling video games. So again, it depends so much on your team, who you have to work with, and the industry you're in.
Of course. I think that always entrepreneur must be always in the project management or project development, always, because that's his main skill, no? Like to develop a new project, no? It's one of his main skills, no? As an entrepreneur. You You were talking before at the podcast about something which I think may not work, may have not been thought about before, but nowadays is very common. Normally, and you are an engineer, normally most projects right now, new ventures, are worked out with managers, but mostly by engineers. And you're a right example because you're an engineer. No? Is it how common or how important is to have an engineer on the team?
Well, again, it depends upon your business and also what your aspirations are for it. If you, let's say your business is a bakery or a retail kiosk or a dental practice or a business strategy consulting practice, perhaps you can get very far without hiring an engineer. Your product development may not require software development. It may require other forms of development. For example, delivering food or providing a professional service to the customer.
But once you want to scale up,
so a couple of things. One is it is becoming easier these days to outsource any non-strategic function to a internet service provider or an application service provider who handles your back-end processing or billing or accounting or finance or all of those functions. It's becoming easier to outsource that, so the staff that you need to have on hand is for handling those is minimal. You still need some staff, most likely, to manage the independent third party, but still that's one approach. On the other hand, if the product is an app or software or hardware or anything that contains AI, a combination of hardware and software, you're going to have to develop a engineering team, and it'll probably have at least software in it and possibly also software and hardware. And then you will need to. And so if you are an entrepreneur who wants to go in that direction and doesn't have those skills yourself, almost certainly you're going to have to hire somebody or bring on board somebody who does. And something to think about is whether that person should be a co-founder and shares in the equity of the business with you in a significant way, or comes on as a member of your team, also presumably has equity, but not as much as a co-founder would. And you have to weigh which configuration will lead to the greatest success for the business. If you think the commitment that you would gain from the other person is so great, if you and he become he or she become co-founders, that it would benefit the company ultimately, then that's the way to go. If you think the skills that you're getting are more readily available, or that you need are more readily available, so that you don't need to make that person a co-founder, then you could make them a senior member of your team. There's a lot in the book on choosing a co-founder and team members. And skills, of course, complementary skills to you are one of the things that you're looking for, but you're also looking for character, and the direction of the company may change, but so the skills that you think you're looking for right now might change. But if you find somebody who has qualities that you respect and value, qualities like diligence, honesty, integrity,
teamwork.
Teamwork. These can be more valuable in the long term. Mm-hmm. I say that I talk about the 3 C's that you're looking for in a co-founder: complementarity of skills with yours, character, and that's sort of the absolute value of the person independent of the specific role that they're playing. And 3 is the ability to co-create a vision for the company. And if you are thinking of bringing on a co-founder, realize that they're going to contribute and should contribute to the direction of the company in a very significant way, maybe as much or more as you. And you want to make sure that the vision that the 2 of you, or if there may be even more than 2 of you, have is it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it has to be close enough so that you can work together towards a common goal, and then refine any differences that you may have as you work towards that goal.
I like what you said. You said co-create, not create, co-create, because
it
must be done as a team.
That's right.
I think that partners must always think first on the team and then on themselves. If they don't think first on the team, then they should not be partners. No? Well, one last question talking about your book, which we're going to have a class tomorrow about it with our students at UFM Madrid. Unleash Your Inner Company. Anything more about the book, which I think we can read on the book, which is interesting to read? What chapters do you recommend more? What do you think about the most important points that we can get from the book?
Well, there are 26 chapters in the book. The first 24 chapters are a 10-step guide to discovering, launching, and scaling your ideal business. Chapter 25 is regulations, the hidden roadblocks to your success. How do you deal with regulations? Should you simply comply with them? Should you try to circumvent them? Or should you try to overturn them? And in that chapter, I give the example of a 9-year-old boy who successfully overturned regulation in his community. And so if a 9-year-old boy can do it, so can you. So anyway, it's a fun chapter. In most respects, starting a business has gotten easier in the last 25 or 30 years since I started my first company. But only in one way has it gotten harder, and that's regulatory compliance. And so that chapter, I think, will have some valuable content there. And then the last chapter is the ethics of entrepreneurship, making the world more positive, sum, and abundant. And in my view, entrepreneurs are no more honest or have no more integrity or concern for their fellow man, no more or less than people in other fields. But I do believe entrepreneurs are uniquely ethical in a different sense of the word. And that is, they make the world a better place by finding new solutions to unsatisfied customer needs. And that chapter develops how, by doing that, entrepreneurs make the world more positive, sum, and abundant.
What countries, in what countries do the entrepreneurs have a better life? Or your experience in traveling around the world?
Well, I think it's hard to beat the United States. Of course, I'm biased. I was born in the U.S. I raised in the U.S. I lived my entire life there. And of course, it's the world I know. But then again, look at all of the innovation that has come out of the U.S. over the last
the most
200 years. Mm-hmm. And it is relatively free. not as free economically or socially as we'd like it to be, but we forget how essential economic freedom is to entrepreneurship. Every time there's a new regulation, possibly some form of entrepreneurship is being stifled or handicapped. And, the United States, as compared to most countries, still has a relatively lightweight regulatory burden. It varies from state to state. Texas, Florida, these states have a lighter regulatory burden than my state, California, does, and say New York. And for that reason, many entrepreneurs are moving from California to Austin, Texas, and Miami, Florida. So a measure that I think is really worthwhile is the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index. And the United States is ranked 5 or 6 or 7 at the moment, I think, sadly. We used to be number 3 when the ranking first came out in 2005. But see where your country is on the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index. The index wasn't published last year. You may have to go back to 2020 or 2021. And no matter where your country is, think about how you can cut your rank in half. The beauty of the ranking is the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index. It tells you exactly where your country is doing well and where it needs to improve. And let the leaders, political leaders and others in your country know how important it is to economic success in your country to be an easy place to do business in. There are things like trading across borders and the ease of starting a company, ease of getting title to property, of electricity, and so forth. I like to say that any country can cut its rank in half in 3 to 5 years if they put their mind to it. And that improves the quality of life for everybody in the country, not just the entrepreneurs.
Number 1 country right now is New Zealand.
Yes.
By the price that is far away and a small country of 4 million inhabitants, so it's not like the best market, but it's very open for that business.
Yes.
Well, John, it's a pleasure to have you here at UFM Madrid. We hope to see you again soon. We wish you the best success in your business, and especially tomorrow in our class. You're going to teach our students. And well, from Rodolfo Bay at UFM Madrid, thanks for your time, and we'll see you soon.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Bye.